Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. This is Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. I'm Karun Avatar Das. With me, my dear co-host Jai Jagannath Prabhu. This is episode 43. We're well on our way to completing our 1 year commitment. Only 9 episodes away. We're super glad to have come this far. But I think, Jai, I think it's been relatively, I mean, there were tough moments, but it wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it would be,
Sure.
What do you think?
It's always hard for me, but that's because it's an internal issue.
Right.
It's been, I've been surprised that the year is almost over, so it's been relatively smooth.
Yeah, it's so quite soon we'll hit that 52. Anyway, that is completely besides the point. Right now we have this super vibrant, bursting with vitality, golden shining individual in the bottom of the screen. His name is Ragav Sharma. He is a power lifter, and we're so happy to have him with us and hear his story. I'm not gonna say anything about him, maybe because I've never actually met him and we're only meeting right now. And we're going to give him an
I grew up with Raghav. I didn't grow up with him, but I watched him grow up practically. I'm from the Chicago Temple Monastery, and I saw Raghav growing up and becoming who he is today. So it's been kind of cool to have you here. But Raghav, we want to let you speak for yourself. You're a doctor, actually. You're in residency. I don't know what it is that you're trying to specialize in specifically. You have a podcast called Prevent Pod.
Yep.
Where you're anyway. So let's hear about that. Just who you are in short. You can.
Sure. Thank you for having me on. This is actually the first podcast that I've ever been on myself. I have my own podcast and I interview others, but I've never been on one. So a little bit nervous, I will admit that. But essentially, I am a doctor. I'm specializing in physical medicine and rehabilitation, which is a field which essentially tries to take whatever issues or disabilities or challenges someone might be facing and try to rehab them into back to what they want to be doing, whether that's like running, lifting, powerlifting, whatever it is. A lot of that comes from my own kind of story, which I'm assuming we're going to get into in just a little bit. So I'm not going to talk about that too much. But other than that, I have a podcast called The Preventive Medicine Podcast at Prevent Pod on Instagram, where we talk about a lot of concepts related to preventive medicine, kind of so that you can manage your own risks, so that you don't need healthcare as much. And when you do, then it's actually necessary. And that's kind of it. And I power lift, but I also am I signed up for a marathon. So I'm actually going to be running. Yeah, it's very surprising. I'm going to be running in, I think that's 4 weeks now.
Oh, wow. That's why on your Instagram page, there's so much of your training that you're undergoing.
That's why. I ran
full marathon.
Yeah, full marathon.
That's like 26 point something miles.
26.3,
right?
Yeah.
Dang.
Wow, man. How long have you been training for that?
I think 8 weeks now.
Wow.
8 or 10 weeks. I'm not really a runner. Before that, the most I'd run was like 2 miles. And then I wanted to challenge myself in a new way. So I was like, okay, I'm running a marathon now.
Wow.
Dude, that's serious, man. I hope you don't get injured.
I've been good so far. Fingers crossed. That looks like we'll be good to go.
Hey, Raghav, I want to ask this question right now. What's the difference between lifting and powerlifting?
Okay, so powerlifting is a sport, and it consists of 3 main lifts. So you compete in the squat, the bench, like the squat, like where you squat down with the weight, the bench press, where you're pushing the weight off your chest, and the deadlift, where you're just picking the weight up off the ground. So the sport of powerlifting is try to maximize those 3 lifts, and there's some technical standards as well for each lift. So it's not like anything goes. When you squat, you have to go to a certain depth. When you bench, you have to pause it for a little bit on your chest so that you're not like heaving it. And then when you deadlift, you have to like hold it there for a little bit, and you have to be like completely locked out. And those are just kind of like the technical standards. And there's a whole bunch of other jargon, like white lights, having the judge approve the lift, whatnot. But essentially try to lift the most weight possible.
Okay, so we want to get into your story. How did you get into powerlifting as a sport, or just weightlifting in general? Because I didn't know your story until I think we met up in New York at the Blue.
Blue Bottle Coffee. Yeah.
Blue Bottle Coffee. And I think that I think you had mentioned something there, and I was completely unaware of that story. So I think this is a part that's going to be really important for this particular episode.
Sure. So I have a disease, I guess, called hypothyroidism. And a lot of people actually experience this disease. However, the way I experienced it was in a completely very strange way. So when I was I grew up in I was born in San Diego and was in California for a lot of my earlier life. And obviously went to the beach a lot there. So when I was 4, I always forget the exact age. My mother always corrects me, but I always say 4. Okay. So when I was 4, we went to a beach and I drank some seawater. I just fell in like any kid would. And then I got sick for the week after that. And then we saw in the news that there was a bacterial overgrowth, whatever happened. And then, so I resolved my sickness. However, over the entire next year, I just gained a lot of weight. So between the ages of 4 and 5, I gained 50 to 60-ish pounds, which obviously is a 4-year-old. That should be how much you weigh in general. Right. You shouldn't be gaining that much weight on top of what you already have. And we couldn't figure out why. So we went to the doctor's office because my dad and my parents were just generally worried. And they were like, oh, your mother's feeding him too much. But she was feeding my brother the exact same amount, who's still only slightly younger than me. So clearly it wasn't that. And then eventually, because hypothyroidism is typically present in kids that young, unless there's some super strange anomaly reason. And then eventually we were diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and I was given Synthroid, which is essentially replacement thyroid hormone. And after that is when I started to regain my energy, started to regain my activity level and everything that a normal kid should be doing. But I always had the weight, because the weight is something that doesn't just fly off of you. It's just going to stay there unless you do something about it. So I started feeling normal again, thanks to the medication. So I was like, okay, we're back to going, doing kid activities. And then I grew up with that extra weight on me. And then I really took it for granted that I felt great. I saw my endocrinologist every year, every 6 months actually. And then every time they would tell me that I need to start doing something about losing weight. And this is when I was a teenager, not when I was 5 or 6 years old at this point, because you're not going to tell a 5 or 6 year old to lose weight. But when I was a teenager, okay, you need to start thinking about somehow losing weight. Otherwise, this could seriously impact you down the road. And then I'll always remember there's this one doctor visit where the doctor was like, okay, so at this point, we've been telling you all of this, but now if you don't do anything, you were actually right borderline becoming diabetic. At 16 years old, I was already 260 pounds at 500, at 5'8", 5'9", something like that. So it was not a good shape to be in. And when you're young, obviously, you have vitality, your youth will take care of a lot of the issues. But as you get older, if you don't take care of those things, they're going to come back to haunt you real quick. So for some reason at that point, I decided it's time to do something. And I started, first thing I did was, I don't think we had smartphones back then that could Google on the way home. But once I got home, I Googled, how do I lose weight? And then, I think it was, how do I get a 6-pack? Because that's obviously the first thing you Google, not losing weight. So then I started the process of trying to lose weight, fell for every single myth or gimmick that is out there, because the first thing that you see is not obviously going to be the most evidence-based practical approach. It's going to be the people who are trying to make money. So went through all of that, started training, started lifting weights. And then eventually I found I really enjoy lifting weights. And then it just kept kind of growing from there. And I didn't even think about powerlifting. Originally, I was thinking about bodybuilding, because you see all these people who look incredible. They look like the figurines you would buy at the toy store. So I'm like, I want to look like that. That's what I want to do. Right. Then eventually, once you learn more about it, you get into it, you realize that's not really something I want to do, because it takes, number one, an immense amount of discipline and an immense amount of just you have kind of to dedicate your life to get that lean for that amount of time. Right. But then I realized I like the strength aspect of this. And there's a sport called powerlifting where they don't necessarily care how you look, but it's about how much you lift. And then from there, I signed up for my first meet, and the rest is, as they say, history.
Wow,
man.
So what did that do for you? I guess the part that is interesting for me is that we get messages from guys who suffer from depression. And, I was saying pre-podcast, I think depression is a real thing, but I think a lot of the depression that is experienced by our generations, millennials and after, is just because of being very irresponsible with the sort of choices that we make in regards to our self-care, which is that word self-care has been monopolized by a certain group. So it sounds cringy, but basically what it is, how you take care of your physical body, how you take care of your mind. So yeah, I'm kind of interested to hear about what was going on for you internally from being like, essentially overweight and then this journey into like powerlifting and how it transformed you mentally or internally. Yeah, that part, I'm interested about that part specifically.
Sure. So I do want to start by saying that clinical depression is definitely very real. And if someone is experiencing that, like definitely go get checked out, because suicide is obviously it's like increasing. There's large incidents of it. And if this is something that you're struggling with, go get that checked out. But what I think you're trying to describe is that people don't have appropriate coping strategies or like ways to manage their own emotions and ways to manage their own life and how they deal and manage with the various stresses that life throws at people. And lifting weights is definitely one of those. So for me, when I first started lifting weights, I think the first thing that I realized was the sense of control that I have, because it's not like someone else is lifting the weight. It's not like the weight's lifting itself. I have to lift the weight. So you can like progressively see yourself get stronger. Like, for example, I started out benching just the bar, 45 pounds. And then over a consistent amount of time by like training and knowing how to train and figuring out these various technique things, suddenly I can bench 135 pounds, which is 45 pounds on each side. And then you keep going, and then eventually you get to 225 pounds. And then it just keeps going up. And you can like see how what you do, the input that you put in, leads to an external output, and it gives you a great sense of control. The other thing that it did for me is when I was losing weight using that, you can physically see the progress that you're making by putting in the effort. So I am watching the food that I'm eating. I'm kind of like logging all of my lifts. I know exactly what I'm inputting, and I see these changes in the mirror. I see the scale going down, and these are all things that I can control. So that's kind of the first thing that it did for me, was like, I have the power to change, and I have the power to do the things that I want in my life. So let's do it.
Right. Sense of real like personal autonomy. So how exactly did because I mean you started being pretty heavy, pretty overweight as far as I'm gathering. So like how quickly did you begin to see results, and what sort of ages are we talking about here as well? Like when did you get into it? Did you see yourself starting to lose weight quite effectively and rapidly? Just tell us more about that journey.
Sure. So when I started really trying to get serious about this, like when I Googled how to get a six pack, I believe it was around 16. And that's when I started to like just dabble into resistance training, dabble into just different ways to lose weight. And I think it wasn't until a full year later where I really just like started really getting into resistance training. Before that was like going to the YMCA, just like hopping around the machines, going on the treadmill, doing some cardio to try to lose weight. And then after that, I think in my senior year of high school is when I started really getting into lifting weights. And then throughout college, that kind of just continued growing. And by the time I think my first meet I did when I was at the end of my junior year in college. So that's like 20, something like that. And then my weight loss, I think 16 was when I was at my heaviest, around 260 pounds. And then I think by the time I started college, when I was 18-ish, I'd gotten down to about 170, high 170, something like that. So I lost a significant amount of weight in those 2 years.
Oh, so like, wow, man. What you use this one word? You use this one word, meat. What does that mean? Is it like a competition?
Yeah. So powerlifting meet is a competition. Yeah. Synonymous word.
Right. Okay. Forgive my ignorance. I'm just.
Oh, no. It's just the jargon. Sorry.
Everyone else as well. Okay. So then, like, how long did it take you to feel like you basically got into a space where you're like optimal? Like, I mean, you look pretty damn good right now. I can only see your shoulders and your face, but I can tell. You look
that's the good part. That's the good
part. Yeah, man. How long did it take you to get to a space where you were like, okay, health is pretty optimum right now?
So the thing about health is that there isn't necessarily an optimum. It's just kind of how you look and how you feel and how the numbers stack up on like the when you get your labs drawn with the doctor. So right now I can say I'm definitely carrying an excess weight, but it's also about like I want to say like body acceptance, but there's a difference between health and like just pure appearance. So this is something I recently talked about actually. I think on one of my second podcasts, something like that. But So there are people who obviously look like bodybuilders who are shredded, have six packs, like not an ounce of fat on them. And they might not necessarily be the most healthy because at that point, it's not physiologically healthy to be there. And then someone also may look very like large, have a large amount of fat mass on them that you can see, but be pretty healthy by like all of like going to the doctor and seeing their lab results. They could be very healthy that way. So health and the body don't necessarily like, they're not exactly correlated. Obviously, there's a good idea if someone looks like they're in shape, they probably are. But the point, what I'm trying to make is that optimal is something that we can't really say there's an optimal. It's just kind of how you look and how you feel and how your body performs for the task that you want it to. So right now, I feel pretty great. Obviously, right now I weigh 230 pounds and I'm going to be running a marathon. So typically when people think of marathon runners, they think of a lot like skinnier people.
Yeah, like
I'm not one. Exactly. I'm not one of those, but I feel great. I'm up to the task. I ran a half marathon just this past Saturday, and I'm going to be going up to like 16 or 17 miles on this coming Saturday. So I feel great.
What other factors? Because you mentioned control, and that was something that you discovered in the very outset of really taking this weightlifting journey seriously. But now that you've been lifting, so how many years has it been since you started?
So it's been about a decade now.
A decade. So I'm interested in some of the other things that you've discovered that, some of the other internal factors that you've discovered that makes weightlifting like a viable option for coping with life stresses.
Sure. So I think in and of itself, resistance training and just, I guess, any form of exercise, I happen to really like resistance training. Some people might not. Some people might really enjoy running. So whatever form it is, you can obviously find a lot of benefit in that, like physically, but also mentally, and finding that as a coping strategy. So for me, that's literally like a way that it's kind of like a thing I have to do at this point to feel, productive or like I'm doing something. It's just a part of my day. If I don't do it, I feel like I'm missing something. And it's just a way that I get to express myself in a way that I want to in my quote unquote craft. That makes me feel like me. It's essentially part of my identity at this point. Some of the other things that I got from it are the sense of discipline. So if you sign up for a powerlifting competition or a meet and you have a training program, if you don't follow that training program, you probably will not perform that well at the meet. So it's no matter how you feel that day, no matter like what else is going on, you have to accomplish those tasks so that you can reach your goal. So it's kind of that sense of discipline where you have to do this, so you schedule the rest of your day around it. You have to do, and for example, that can apply to different things. So going through medical school, I know I have a test coming up at this point, so I have to structure everything else around that and just finish these tasks. It's not a point of like complacency or anything where you just put these off. Oh, I'll do it later. Or procrastination is just, okay, I have this goal. I have to accomplish these tasks daily. And it kind of sets you up with that discipline to take on not only the lifting or the training aspect, but kind of other things in your life as well.
Nice. I'm starting taking notes here also. What other factors, because you seem like a pretty sovereign person when it comes to your health at the present moment, despite your illness and having to take medication. Like, do you have to still take medication?
Yep, every day.
Every day. Wow. Aside from that factor, you seem like you have a lot of autonomy because of how you're consciously approaching your health. What other factors have been important for developing autonomy? Like, one of the words that's been really important in this whole journey of dealing with like men's issues is sovereignty. It's been like a really big word. If you look at the mental sphere of content creation for men's issues, one of the biggest words is sovereignty. Sovereignty is like one of those important words. Mm-hmm. And health is an area where if there isn't a lot of sovereignty, then you're probably not going to have sovereignty in any other area of your life. Like, you're going to be finished. And so what have been other important factors aside from the resistance training that you're speaking to now that have helped your health in general? And as a person who's in physical rehabilitation, as a doctor coming to specialize in that field, what are other factors that have been important for you specifically, and also in general for getting that sort of health sovereignty? Sidebar, this is slightly a selfish question because, as you know, I mentioned it before the podcast also. I came out of the womb not trusting you know,
anything
medical. I'm like, nope, I'm not about it. And, although I've calmed down in the last week and a half, you know, the last month I was being a little bit extra about it. And I told you my little story for why I think that might be the case. But in any case, I'm really interested in things that will give me sovereignty in terms of my health. Even when I have an allergy issue, I just tolerate it before I'll take any medication for it. Like I have to be at like an intense level of pain before I'll agree to like take a medication for it. So I'm kind of curious. It's partially selfish, but partially in terms of your actual discovery as a doctor who's also dealing in this field. What are the other factors that really help develop that sovereignty and health? Because even in weightlifting, there are so many other factors that can make that actually successful.
Yep. Sure. So I guess first off to start is the way I view health is not as like an end destination. Like we're not all trying to be healthy. What I think of it as that we want to be healthy so that we can do what we want in life. So if you're not healthy, like if you're suffering, let's say someone's diabetic and they get to a point in their diabetes where they have to have like a leg amputated, and that is a severe complication of diabetes. Then let's say what they had a dream of traveling the world. Suddenly that becomes way more difficult if you have an amputated leg. So in that way, I view health as like a basis. Let's build this foundation so that you can do what you want to do with the rest of your life. That doesn't mean like living your life around the gym or eating right, like quote unquote right. It's just doing what you want to do. Okay. So generally the principles around that are being able to like sleep, because sleep is a huge aspect of it, sleeping 7 to 9 hours and making sure you get good quality sleep in those. So everything around that, like sleep hygiene, make sure you have a set time before you go to sleep, set time you wake up, all of those different kinds of things. Having a generally good diet, and a good diet is very dubious term. It can mean a lot of different things to different people, but typically it means a diet full of fruits and vegetables, that is also sufficient in protein for whatever your goals are. That's calorically controlled. So you like eat the amount of calories that you need for whatever it is you want to do. So that's the two things. And then exercise. So the exercise guidelines, just at those as a minimum, which is essentially 150 minutes to 300 minutes of moderate intense activity. So it's like walking 3 miles an hour, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity, which is like running a week, and 2 full body resistance trainings. So that's the minimum. More exercise is obviously great, but those are the 3. And then after that is being able to manage stresses. So that's what I was talking about, like having effective coping strategies and just mechanisms so that you have an outlet for when life gets difficult. And the last one is being able to like have and maintain good relationships with those around you, whether that's with your family, your friends, because humans are social. And having that sense of connection with whatever it is a huge aspect of both their mental health and their health in general. So that's kind of the main 5 pillars and 5 generalities of what people should try to maintain to have like a good, solid foundation of health with which they can use to do whatever else they want.
Yeah. Raghav, one particular realm there, which, I mean, I'll just speak from my own personal experience. I've been finding a lot of difficulty in getting like really good quality sleep, and that's something that I wonder about a lot, like what can be done to make it better, because my routine is pretty good. I go to bed around the same time, wake up around the same time. I try to be mindful. I think probably the biggest thing is like screens and like the mental stimulation that happen from that. I spend a lot of time with screens, so like I take in, just also through my work, so I take in a lot of information, process a lot of information. But like what tips would you have around getting making sure you got good quality sleep?
Sure. So I always want to preface this by saying I'm not a sleep doctor, and everything that is based off my own reading and research. So I guess the first thing is also like the effect of exercise on sleep. Getting exercise daily really helps you go to sleep and have more quality sleep. Also, I don't know if you take caffeine, but also limiting your caffeine intake. Some people are very sensitive. So even if you have like a cup of coffee at noon or 1, sometimes really ruins people's sleep. So that's something also to watch out for. And then also if your room has any sort of light in it. So some people need the room completely dark. So like if they get blackout curtains so that there's 0 light coming in at all. Those are kind of the three that I think you didn't mention. And also waking up at like the same time, just having that schedule. What else is there? I think those are the three that come off the top of my mind.
Okay, what about, and now I'd also like to know about outlet. Like, what is your outlet, Raghav? How do you deal with stress? I mean,
Sure.
obviously, gym, lifting, that helps a lot. What a release.
Yeah.
Amazing. But other than that, like, what do you do?
Sure. So as you said, my primary one is definitely exercise. I think my secondary one is typically hanging out with friends and being able to relate to other people. That's where that aspect of having and maintaining relationships comes in. And then the third one is getting out into nature. So I recently, not by recently, I mean like 3 or 4 years ago, discovered I really love hiking and being in nature. So now, as often as I can, I try to get out and do some sort of difficult hike and just experience the world around me in like its rawest form or nature, I guess. So those are, I guess, my three main ones.
Nice.
You have a health and fitness coaching service that you.
Mm-hmm.
How long you've been doing that for?
So I actually started coaching. The way that came about was when I started losing a lot of that weight to begin with from 16 to 18. People were asking, because it looks pretty drastic when you go from 260 pounds to 5'8". Obviously gaining a little bit of height helped. I gained 2 inches, not a lot, but I went to like 5'10" at essentially 180 pounds, which is a huge difference. People were asking me, how did you do this? So instead of just answering everyone, I did the logical thing in my mind was I made a website and then I just wrote articles instead. So I'm like, here, look at this link instead of me typing this whole thing out again. So then from there, eventually in college, it turned into people asking me like more details. So I was like, okay, let me start coaching you. So I started coaching service in undergrad, and then I had several clients there. And then in medical school, I kind of put it on hold because there was a lot more time needed to study medicine.
Right.
And then I recently actually just started coaching again.
So during this, because one of the factors you mentioned, which is you would think self-evident, but it needed to be mentioned, by having good quality relationships is really one of the things that's going to help build autonomy in terms of your health even. And lockdown since 2020 has seen a spike in, well, obviously less social gatherings have been happening for a year or so. And there's been like a spike in like suicides and other sort of things have happened. Maybe it's just a correlation, but it seems there's some relationship there between the lockdowns and like the depression thing going up, people overdosing and all sorts, and suicides. So how do you guide people? How have you been guiding people in their health during this like kind of sensitive time period?
Sure. So I can't say that I've like literally been helping people. No one has physically come to me and been like, I need help navigating through this time. Sure. But I can tell you a lot of things that I've seen and a lot of things that I would say. Okay. And some of that is, number one, this is a very difficult time. As a healthcare provider, I didn't literally experience how terrible it was in hospitals because I was still a medical student when it really started happening. Sure. If it gets worse now, then I will experience it, but hopefully it doesn't. So a lot of people, this is a bad period, and it's okay that there are bad periods. That's life. Every period is, you're not going to be running through the fields, dancing and prancing every single day, every single year. Sometimes that happens. It's just being able to have those strategies in place so that you can manage that when it comes. So unfortunately, it's been prolonged. It's been over a year now that it's been this difficult, and healthcare providers are definitely feeling very burnt out. Very just like exhausted of everything that's going on, but you kind of just have to put up with it and hopefully get a nice vacation afterwards. But it's really just having those like coping strategies and mechanisms there and finding alternative ways to like talk with others and gather in groups. So whether that's Zoom, if people are using Zoom, or going outside. Being outside is obviously fantastic if it reduces the risk of transmission quite a bit. So just do what you can, find alternative routes, and know that it is okay not to be okay sometimes, and that's kind of how life works. You're not always going to be fine and dandy.
Raghav, what do you? Yeah. That's kind of the here comes the question, bro. What do you struggle with? Because I look at you and I just see a guy flying through life. I see a guy just like flourishing in every department. But that can't be the case. So what's difficult for you?
That can't be
what if I told you it's the case?
Right. I will not accept it.
No, if only. I think the biggest thing that I struggle with is just waiting. I have zero patience, like zero, like very minimal patience. So I just want to do things. So the biggest thing that I struggle with is knowing that I'm very ambitious. I want to do a lot of things. And sometimes that gets me in trouble. There's a story that is a whole long, like probably hour-long story that I won't tell here, but it got me in really bad trouble. So a lot of those things that I struggle with are just knowing that there's a time and place for things and that I have to be patient and wait my turn. And also the struggle of wanting to do something, but not being able to do so, and seeing so many other people like blowing up. For example, their podcast goes from like 0, all of a sudden they're getting 1 million downloads a month. Stuff like that. It's just difficult to see. And it's like, I'm putting in so much effort and so much work, and my content is arguably better than what some of these people are putting out, and they're just blowing up. And I'm just kind of here spinning my wheels a little. Obviously we're growing, but it feels like I'm spinning my wheels. Those are the kinds of things.
So basically what it comes down to is like, whenever you find yourself not flourishing as much as you want to, then that gets you down. That gets you down.
Putting it that way makes it sound really not like very much. So no comment. I will admit I'm in a very good headspace most of the time. And I try to look at life from like a detached point of view, whereas life is going to happen. It's kind of how I approach every day and what I make of that day. So I don't know. I guess I don't know.
So it's like, that's really important, Raghav. That's really important mindset, right? Like basically everything, you wouldn't be able to achieve any of what you're achieving if you didn't have the right mindset. So would you say that that's something? Are you guys still with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're listening.
Yeah, we're listening.
Would you say that like really positive mindset is something that you've always had, or like, just let's talk about mindset. Like, what's the key to having a really good mindset of success?
So I can only speak for myself because I'm only I only know my own mind. Hopefully I know my own mind. So I think I didn't always have like this kind of mindset, but I can tell you where it came from and where it really started developing. And that is during medical school. After the first 2 years, you take this like biggest test, which is called USMLE Step 1. And this is really the test that kind of determines the entire trajectory of the rest of your career. Because the higher you score on this, the better residency you go to. The higher you score on this, the more like doors open up, kind of just everything opens up. And it's a really big test covering the first entire 2 years of medical school. So it's a really difficult exam. And when I came into medical school, I was not like, obviously I'm doing decent academically, but compared to a lot of the people, like I didn't graduate with a 4.0 in high school, which might not sound that crazy, but all of my friends like a 4.5, 4.6. So I'm not like super academically inclined. So I also failed my first exam of medical school. So between all that, I really wanted to do well on this one exam and kind of prove myself. So I took it as a challenge to myself. So not only did I try to study as hard as I could, but also tried to do other like stupid little things just to prove that I could. So for example, the entirety of the time that I was studying for like a dedicated 6 months, I took cold showers every morning, which might be normal to some people, but for me, it was terrible. So I had to force myself. I can do this every morning. I can take a cold shower. Oh, and it was at 4 a.m. Mangal Arti time, which also is not normal to most people. So wake up at 4 a.m., take a cold shower. And that was kind of like the start to the day, just because I can. And the entire series of studying for that test was not only studying very hard, but it was also just doing things because I can. Like there's no rhyme or reason for doing this. It doesn't make my life more comfortable. It makes it more uncomfortable. It's just doing it for the purpose of doing it. And at the end of it, I ended up scoring really well on that exam, and it opened a lot of doors. And it also showed me that I can do things that I want to just because no one has to tell me to do it, and I can accomplish it. And just, I guess that's kind of where it comes from. Then whatever challenge it is, I kind of just take it and do it.
You know, not to sound cliche, but no pains, no gains, right?
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah.
And I was mentioning this the other day in one of our men's, like our scriptural men's sangha that we do. And I mentioned the same point, no pains, no gains. And I said, I know this applies to like the gym and weightlifting, which is our topic for today. But I was like, this is a metaphysical statement. I know we normally translate it in terms of the physical impact, but it's like a metaphysical statement. And it seems that you were able to realize the far-reaching extent of such a phrase like that when you were studying for this medical exam. And I would sort of that have the mindset where you're ready to embrace pain to make gains. And now, okay, and then again, this applies specifically to weightlifting. It's like when I first started going to the gym, I started going to the gym about 2 years ago. And it's been mostly a love and hate relationship for like a year and a half. And then when I couldn't go to the gym, I discovered that I actually missed the gym. Like I like lifting weights. Like I want to do that more. I want to get a little bit more into it, not like powerlifting level into it, but just more into it. But the experience of doing so in the beginning was the pain of like doing a pull-up, for example, or the pain of, trying to push the bar up with just 25-pound weights on it. Right after the guy before you had to took off the 45-pound weights, or the pain of just like being a little embarrassed that you're not as strong as some. Yeah. So how do you embrace those pain points? How do you get yourself to embrace those pain points? And this is kind of an aspect of the last question that I wanted to ask, or one of the last questions I wanted to ask, in terms of why should others do this? Like specifically weightlifting, specifically men, like why should we do this? Like if you had to make a case for it, but as a sort of subset of that larger question, how do you get yourself to embrace the pain?
Sure. So I'll answer that second part to why people should do this afterwards, because that could be a little longer. Exactly. So the first part is you don't necessarily have to embrace it. So for example, obviously lifting and doing anything new, whether it's lifting, whatever it is going to be difficult. As humans, we are very comfortable with what we do and we don't want to go outside that lane. So when you start doing something new, the natural path or course, I guess, for the mind is, this is uncomfortable. Let's go back to staying in our lane. Let's do what we do. Whether that's lifting, whether it's, let's say, if you put in the context of like the temple, waking up at 4 a.m. People do not want to do that, but all of a sudden they have to. It's very uncomfortable. They hate it. It's very painful, but eventually you just get used to it, right? Taking cold showers, maybe something that people do at the temple, also something that people hate. You don't want to do it. You just get used to it. So something like weightlifting is going to be very challenging at the beginning, especially because you're challenging your body in some way new. So you feel very achy and you get what we call delayed onset muscle soreness, which could end up being really painful and you don't really want to do it. But the good news is that that's the kind of pain that goes away. Once you get your body used to something, then it starts actually craving it more. I don't know about you, but when I lift, I want to lift in the next couple of days so that I don't feel super stiff and I just want to keep going. It's just kind of a progressive loop where you want to lift, you don't want to experience the crazy soreness, so you go lift again. And then eventually you get used to it. And your body's like, okay, now I have a new normal. Let's widen this lane. Let's add lifting to it. So now this is your new normal state instead of it being something that you have to take a right or left turn for. So that's one way. You don't necessarily have to embrace it. It just kind of becomes part of your daily routine. And a case for why it should become part of your daily routine, this is where we're talking about why you should lift, is lifting is resistance, or I guess exercise in general, is one of the greatest things that you can do. And there's so many benefits of it. If you follow, there's like a lot of doctors, the exercise is medicine movement. People post these long list of benefits. For example, like decreased risk of diabetes, obesity, heart disease, all-cause mortality, stroke, all of these different things, like all the leading causes of death. If there's one pill that you could take that would improve all of these things, would you do it? That pill is exercise, stuff like that. So they'll post things like that. But when it comes to resistance training alone, there are some unique benefits. So one of those is increased bone density. So this applies more so to women, but for men as well. Oftentimes, what happens when we get older is that our bones start getting more and more frail. And then when you break a bone, obviously you break a bone, so it's terrible. You don't heal like you're a kid when you're 4 anymore. You just put a cast on, you'll be good in 6 weeks. It's a significant thing. And one of the stats that is really shocking is that if you break a hip, which is more prevalent in ladies, but even for men when they get older, if you break a hip, your all-cause mortality chance for the next 2 years is roughly 75%. And that's not necessarily just
funny. That's wild.
It's bad. It's not necessarily just from the broken hip, but there's so many other things that come from it. Because now all of a sudden you can't really move. You can't do that much with a broken hip. There might be so many other complications that come along from that. There's just so much that goes along with a broken hip. It's actually really catastrophic once you get old. And what can you do to improve that? Improve your bone density and make sure you're more like mobile and agile. And one of the things that can help with that is resistance training. Resistance training is great for increasing your bone density because as you might know, like people give you calcium and vitamin D to increase your bones, but those are just kind of like building materials and a little bit of signal. But you need like that massive stimulus that's like, okay, we need to build some bone here. And how you do that is by loading it, because then you load it and your bone's like, okay, we need to grow to adapt to this load. So it gets stronger. So that's the first thing, is bone density. The second thing is really like fighting obesity and all these other metabolic diseases. So muscle is very inefficient. And I say this meaning that it requires more energy to maintain than like most other tissues in your body, comparatively mostly to fat, because that's what most of us build, either fat or muscle. So it requires 4 calories to maintain, whereas fat only requires 2. So the more muscle you have, kind of the more inefficient your engine is. So you can eat a little bit more and not necessarily gain weight. You need more food to maintain your weight. So what happens is when we're younger, obviously we tend to maintain more muscle because we're like moving around, we're doing activities, we're engaged in sports, all these things that naturally engage our muscle and keep it alive. When you get to 50, 60, 70, your activity levels typically go down. You start becoming more sedentary. And all of a sudden, the muscles that you do have start like atrophying or like decreasing because you don't need them anymore. You're not telling your body, we need these. Right. So all of a sudden, you're eating the same amount of food, but now it's adding weight on and it's contributing to diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all these different things. So that's there. And then directly, muscle fights diabetes, which I think, I can't say a lot of devotees have it, but from my personal experience, it seems that every devotee I've encountered seems to have some level of diabetes.
It's all that olive oil.
Exactly. But so muscle it kind of sends signals out in the body that helps it store glucose, which is sugar. So the more muscle you have, the more signal you have to store glucose, which is good because then there's less glucose running around, and that contributes to, it's a very like basic explanation, but it contributes to improving your risk of diabetes because now you have more stored glucose instead of it just running around your body. So those are kind of the metabolic benefits, and obviously there's a lot more. And then the pure like mortality benefit of it is that it decreases your chance of dying from all causes by up to 20%. So there's a 1/5 less chance you could die just because you lift weights at any point in your life. So those are kind of like the main
good advertisement. There's ways to prevent from death.
Yeah. So those are kind of like the overarching like medical benefits that I would say, but also there's like the mental health aspects where it has been proven that it is a very good way to improve your mental health as a coping strategy. Obviously it increases like your discipline in ways if this is something that you want to use it. And also one of the things that it does is it can make you look better, obviously, which for men is a huge mental boost sometimes, where you see these people and then you might have a negative self-image because you don't look the ideal man. Whereas when you lift weights, you start developing more of a muscular physique, which is typically what society considers desirable. So you have a better self-image that way as well. So there's just so many different benefits, and it doesn't even have to be something difficult that you're doing. So you don't have to power lift. You don't even have to go to a gym. Just start in like some basic resistance exercise. So like if you want to squat, it's so easy. All you have to do is like, you know, those giant 50-pound bags of rice at Costco or something. You can literally just grab that and squat. And that's resistance exercise. So it's very accessible if you think about it, and it has so many benefits. So everyone should be doing it. Sorry, that was quite long-winded.
It was nice. I was looking for more of the selling points because you had a lot of the medical stuff, which for the layman is like, okay.
No. I thought it was very accessible. Don't worry, Raghav. It was good.
All right. Hopefully the listeners thought so. That's what really matters.
Right. So how you kind of get into it a little bit. How would you suggest someone really get into this? Because I feel like with me, the way I got into it, I moved to New York and I wanted to do some physical activity. And my preferred choice of physical activity is dance. I was trained as a dancer. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of like physical, it's like an athletic sport.
Yeah, for sure.
You're doing real dance. And So I was like, I'm gonna get back into dance, but dance in New York is mad expensive. Like for one class was like $25, you know? And
Wow.
if you get like a series of classes, it goes down by like $2 or something. Or there was this one like inexpensive gym, which was $25 like a month. So I was like, okay, that's an easy choice. So that's what got me to like start going to the gym. I had a desire for physical activity. The gym was cheap where I went. But to get like a regular discipline, it took me a little bit of time to really get it. I would go for like a few weeks and then not go for a few months. And I was like back and forth for some time before I started to become more like, okay, I'm really gonna do this. So how does someone develop this sort of, how to get into it a little bit? How would you guide someone to get into this?
When you think of lifting, there's kind of 5 primary movements that you're accomplishing with everything that kind of target all the muscles. So that is a pull. So like you're pulling something towards you, a push, pushing something away, a squat. So like standing down and sitting up in some form, a hinge. And by hinge, it means like kind of having your upper body leaned over and then coming back forward, that kind of movement. And then also a carry. So like holding something and walking with it. So those are the 5 main things that you can accomplish. And kind of in whatever way you can do those things with added weight to you, you can do it. So that's its very core basis resistance training. So now there's a bunch of different applications for you to do this. So I guess the way most people think of this is going to the gym and performing exercises with free weights, with machines, whatever it is. So over there, it's very easy because you see a machine that says pull, you pull, you're done. You see a machine that says push, done. That's it. You don't even have to go to the free weight section if you don't want to. It's very basic. You don't have to do anything just because you see other people do it. If you want to get more intense into it, then yes, you can load up a barbell and deadlift. And that serves as both like a hinge and maybe a little bit of the squat movement. You can literally do a squat with it on your back. You can bench press, all these different things. But if you don't want to go to a gym, you can also do these very simply at home. So like I was saying with the bag of rice, if you literally just hold like a bag of rice, this is a carry right here. Then you just walk around with it. You're set. If you want to do like a push, you lay down on your back, you take that bag of rice and you push. If you want to pull it, there's other ways to do that. There's the kind of workarounds to everything. So whatever you want to do at home, there's always ways to adapt it. If you want to do more of like a squat or a lunge or things like that, then you can put on a backpack, fill it with a bunch of books, whatever's like the heaviest textbooks you can find. There you go. There's resistance. If you want to add to that at home, you can buy resistance bands. And these bands can get really heavy. So they go anywhere from like 5 pounds. You can get bands that go up to like 200 pounds resistance, which is very difficult. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to adapt resistance training. You can go to the gym if you want, if it's more convenient, if you can afford it, or you can do it at home. If you can't go to the gym that often, if you don't have access to a gym, you can't afford it. There's just so many different ways to do it.
Something which occurs to me here is this whole kind of argument of like what is most natural is best for us, right? So like because we see, you know, like in Western society, the whole kind of the whole focus is on comfort and convenience. And so through technology, human beings have created all sorts of devices and contraptions and artificial things to make us more comfortable and make things more convenient. Now, if you sort of like take it all the way back, you could argue that, well, whatever Krishna has designed by nature is going to be best for us because it's most natural and there's less sort of human involvement. So, you know, I've kind of thought about like, especially some of these machines in the gym have just seemed like very artificial to me, like, you know, having this carefully designed thing that isolates just like one muscle on your body. You know, it just seems like where would you ever encounter that in nature? Like, you know, so I just want to sort of bring that into the picture. Is there anything to be said for keeping it natural, you could say? You know, are you aware of research around that where, you know, it's like it's artificial to use these machines that just isolate certain muscles?
Sure. So I think 3 things here. So number 1 is that if you think about it in the long scope, is that when you're going to the gym and on this machine, it's like 5 to 10 minutes out of 24 hours of your day. So it's not like you're training your entire body in that 5 to 10 minutes, that these are the only motions that you can do. So thinking about it in a way that I'm training my muscle just to move in this way because I'm on this machine for 5 minutes isn't necessarily correct, I would say, because when you go back outside, you're like doing whatever natural movement it is. So let's say if it's a leg press, then you're walking, let's say you're going upstairs, you're naturally doing a whole bunch of other movements. And then the second point there is that when it comes to growing muscle is kind of the end point of resistance training, is what we want to do. So if you add resistance and you kind of move in that motion, as long as you're adding muscle, you're getting the benefit, because muscle is what adds to the metabolic benefits, where you're decreasing your risk for all these diseases. It's kind of adding that resistance where you're increasing your bone density. It's doing so much good, just adding that muscle. So it doesn't necessarily matter the means to add that muscle. And then I guess the third thing is that it also comes down to what machines you're using sometimes, because when you go to like these Planet Fitnesses or like cheaper end gyms, they have very specific machines that you can like mass produce because they're cheaper, right? So that's going to be your very artificial restricted movements. When you get to more expensive gyms, which obviously everyone can go to, there are a lot more, I guess, impressive machines that are kind of more natural, quote unquote. So they're like way more free flowing, where they kind of follow the way your body wants to go and all of those different things. And then I guess to add on now a fourth point is that this is where you can go to the free weights. So now human motion is very different from person to person. It's very dynamical. Everyone moves a slightly different way, and there's no one correct form. And a lot of these machines kind of force you into one form, is what you're saying. But if you go to the free weights, all of a sudden you can squat in like 1,000 different tiny variations, but you just have a weight on your back, so it's slightly different. So those are kind of like the 4 points that I raise against that.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I like this final point about free weights being really the way to keep it the most natural, because you're allowing your body to do its own thing the way that it naturally would. And then just one further question on something you mentioned earlier was about how muscle is the most like inefficient type of tissue in your body. So if you build a lot of muscle, you have to eat a lot to maintain that muscle, which obviously puts strain on your digestion or just your digestive system. So like how does that work? Is there kind of like a certain point where one should draw the line and be like, okay, this is no longer healthy? I mean, I look at bodybuilders, sure, they look impressive, they look like, it's insane what they look like, but it doesn't look healthy to me.
Yeah, so the thing that you won't accidentally become a bodybuilder. Like you're not accidentally going to get to a point where you took it too far, where suddenly you're stepping on the Olympia stage. That's never going to happen. So like I said, our body likes to stay in like a set lane of equilibrium, and really getting to go outside of that, it really will take some effort to do so. So when you speak of these bodybuilders, eating for them literally becomes a full-time job, because they have to eat so much, and it's literally painful. They say that the sport of bodybuilding, the ones who succeed are the ones who have to eat the least to get that amount of muscle, because it literally becomes like they're bloated all the time. They can't breathe. They literally have to be eating all day. You will not get to that point. I guarantee it if you're recreational. So kind of the body will keep score and find a way. Like if you add a significant amount of muscle, you'll realize you are feeling a little bit more hungry. Like our brain and kind of our entire neuroendocrine system has different feedback mechanisms, where if you add muscle, suddenly you will notice yourself being a little bit hungrier to maintain that muscle. It's not like you're going to be adding 1,000 or 2,000 calories to your diet. It might just be like a little extra 200 to 300 here and there, and you don't even notice it. So as long as you're like getting like the amount of protein that you want and resistance training, it kind of just goes hand in hand. And most people will naturally find themselves just eating maybe a little bit more, but it's not like you're becoming a bodybuilder.
What's your take on meat?
Yeah, you're a vegan, right? You're a vegan.
I was a vegan for a year, yeah.
For a year, okay.
What do you mean my take on meat?
What's your take on meat? Like, some people say meat's really necessary when you build muscle.
Yeah.
Like that level, like animal protein, whatever. What's your take on that? So
meat is not necessary to build muscle at all. Essentially, what meat does is that it provides a easy, quote unquote, way for people to get all the amino acids, which are the building blocks of like proteins and muscles that you need to build muscle. But there's so many different sources. I have gained a significant amount of muscle have never eaten meat. There's a whole bunch of examples of vegan bodybuilders, vegetarian bodybuilders who get to carrying a large amount of muscle and they never eat meat. So it's not really necessary. Sure, it is easier for a lot of people just because there's easy, high protein options everywhere you go. You go to McDonald's, you'll have like 20 grams of protein in literally any sort of meat thing there. It's going to be a little bit more difficult as a vegetarian because most things won't have high protein. But if you kind of want to eat more protein, there's easily ways to do that. I, as a vegetarian, consume about 200 grams of protein a day. So that comes from
how do you do that? Yeah, okay, you're about to.
So yeah, that comes from sources like seitan, which is like wheat gluten. So if you're gluten intolerant or just like if you have celiac disease, don't eat this. But seitan is a great source. Tofu, just various beans and whatnot, dairy products. If you have a protein shake here and there, and that pretty much between those 5, I get to 200 pretty easily.
Wow. Dope. Yeah, I just wanted you to kind of like put that, like to insert that, thing.
Yeah, you don't need meat at all. But the other thing is, though, that if people are coming from they're very familiar with eating meat and that's kind of the way they grew up, suddenly they become a devotee and it's like, what do I eat? There are a lot of fake meats that are coming out, which when you talk to people who actually have eaten meat and eat these products, they're very similar. So in the future, I think it'll be a lot more accessible for people to go meat free without really like having to look at the tofus of the world, because they could each eat like fake meat and whatnot. It works pretty similarly.
We got a question here from Jacob Bailey. Is that much protein healthy for the kidneys?
Yes, Jacob, it is. The amount of protein that you need for your kidneys to malfunction is like really, really high. It'd probably be like, I think it's like 600 to 700 grams a day, which if you're eating that much protein is not very good. The only consideration is that if you already have some sort of kidney disease where kidneys are not working properly, then maybe you should consider it. But by then you should talk to a nephrologist, not to someone on a podcast, on any podcast. You should be talking to a nephrologist at that point. But yes, eating that much protein is very healthy for your kidneys.
Wow. Great.
Nice. I have no more questions.
I have one more question, which is I'm super interested because like Raghav, you went to like standard med school, right?
Yeah.
But what's so basically I want to bring up this whole topic of like allopathic medicine versus like naturopathic or preventative healthcare, because almost like by definition, Western medicine, allopathic medicine is reactive, not proactive. It's like, let's deal with the symptoms of issues instead of addressing the true causes, right? That's how they make money, because you can give people chemical medicines to suppress symptoms. So how did you kind of prevail, coming out of, because quite honestly, big pharma owns the medical profession, practically speaking. So like, how did you come out of that and, orientate yourself more towards preventative medicine? And then, but how do you reconcile, like, what is the place for allopathic medicine? How do you reconcile the schools of thought?
Sure.
And I brought this up before the podcast started. I was like, if I knew more people like you, I would probably be a lot less skeptical than I am now. But because it's, at least as it appears to a lot of the laymen, the allopathy or modern Western medical industry, and I've actually talked to you about this on other occasions, it just makes one very suspect. Like, it's an industry, and an industry needs consumers, like a consistent flow of consumers. And so that naturally builds a skepticism in the skeptic mind that these guys are not going to be interested in preventing me from getting sick, because that means they lose their consumer base. And so, just amplifying what Pranav was saying. How do you come out of that without that mentality?
There's actually a lot to unpack from what you just said. This could go on for a minute. So if there's a time limit, then please let me know.
No, that's okay. We go for 90 minutes usually, so we can speak about this for half an hour if you want.
Okay, got it. So the first thing is that you stated that like a lot of medicine is like run by big pharma, which I can say that going through medical school and through residency, they don't tell you to prescribe certain drugs. You kind of just use what's available and there's so many different layers to this. So number one, there's drug companies that provide drugs, obviously. And then there's number two, like the people who fund the studies to use these drugs. And then number three, it's what insurance will pay for. So when it comes to you as a physician, oftentimes you go through medical school learning how to help people. And you learn if they have this problem, then I can use this kind of drug because it'll do this effect, all those kinds of things, right? So when it comes to prescribing medicines, oftentimes it may seem that physicians are run by big pharma because they keep prescribing one drug. That's all that's available. And if it's been shown to work, then that's what you use. It's not that physicians are getting paid on the side to use like specific drugs only because big pharma runs medicine. That's a big misnomer. But physicians are there to help people.
Sure. Can I just ask, like, how exactly do you define something working? Like, someone feeling relief from.
So benefit greater than risk. So this is the main thing that every physician looks at when it comes to a drug. So let's say someone has, I don't know, name a condition. Name something.
Clinical depression.
Okay, sure. Clinical depression. So at this point, when you're looking at drugs, there's a bunch of different spectrums of depression, like when you're looking at like the actual clinical criteria and different drugs that you can use for different circumstances. So the benefit of using a drug for this, like the commonly prescribed, is like a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an SSRI. So the benefit of this is that you improve their mood, and the risk that you're looking at is this person could kill themselves. So is it more beneficial for me to provide this drug than it is for me not to do anything, send them to a therapeutic healer and have them suddenly go out and kill themselves? What are you going to do in that situation? What is best for this patient is probably to put them on a drug that has reduced the incidence of suicide, that has some maybe mild side effects, but they're not going to kill themselves. As a physician, if you don't prescribe that and someone leaves and kill themselves, you're not in a good position. You're going to get sued. You're going to lose. It's not going to be very good. So there's all these different things you have to look at when it comes to prescribing drugs. But the main thing is risk versus benefit. And when it comes to any drug, there has to be a more benefit than risk. So some risks are acceptable when it comes to medication. For example, some drugs obviously increase your risk for infection. Like if you have cancer, treating that cancer with a specific drug will probably increase your risk for infection, but you're fighting the cancer, which is the more important battle to have here. So that's that main point right there. I guess the second thing when it comes to allopathic medicine being more reactive, this is something that I actually talked about in one of my recent podcasts as well, is when I came into medical school, I had that same exact view where Western medicine sucks. All they do is they slap a Band-Aid on you and tell you to get out, and hopefully you don't come back, when most people do come back. There's so many different levels to the situation. I guess the first level is that when it does come to disease management, there's only so much you can do at a certain time. You can't sit with someone, guide them through, handhold them through to reduce everything, like reduce their risk completely. You can't get them back to their root cause in that like 15 to 20 minutes that you have. That's just not going to happen. You can do what you can refer them. And then after that, it comes slightly to that patient autonomy, which is something else that we discuss in this episode. Right. The second thing is that physicians don't have that much time anymore. If you go to your doctor, you're only given like 15 to 20 minutes to see them, if that, and that's not because the doctor doesn't want to see you. I guarantee you most physicians would love to speak to their patients for an hour to however long it took, but that's not like the hospital will fire you right away. You won't have a job. Like physicians are essentially just cogs in the wheels that are there for productivity, so that if you don't do your job, essentially you're out of there. So if you're speaking to a patient for 60 minutes, that's too long. You can't see more of them. So that's that other aspect of it where you can't sit down with someone and kind of get down to that root cause. So within that, you do what you can as a physician to reduce your risk of things getting worse. So there's different levels of prevention. There's primary prevention, which is like obviously preventing something from happening altogether. That's the ideal, what we would love to happen. Examples of that are things like vaccines, which is a hot topic, yes. But through vaccines, we have eradicated complete diseases like smallpox, polio, all these different things. Primary prevention, they don't even exist. Secondary prevention is screening and making sure things don't like get worse. So this is when you go to like your health fair, you stick your hand in that cuff and it tells you might have high blood pressure. High blood pressure is something that people don't necessarily notice until it gets too late, because it's called like the silent killer. So all of a sudden you find out you have high blood pressure, you go to the doctor and they kind of help you navigate that, whether it's medication, whatever it is that you need at that point. And there's criteria for this as well that have shown risk benefit. They help you do that. Tertiary prevention is like kind of managing a chronic disease and making sure it doesn't get worse. So this is someone with diabetes who has like, they can't get their sugars under control, but you're doing what you can so that they don't have a foot amputated. They're still doing what they can and making sure things don't get worse, but they don't have time to sit with you and guide you all the way through to try to put it into remission. And then quaternary prevention is like for the people that are like a little bit too deep into whatever disease it is, and they are just trying to improve your quality of life. So this is maybe like end of care if someone has cancer that's too far progressed, instead of kind of forcing unnecessary treatment on someone that puts a financial burden, it puts a like decrease your quality of life, even though you might not live that long. Let's put you into hospice instead. Let's increase your quality of life as much as we can in the time that you have left so that you can enjoy it. So those are kind of ways different prevention is built in. But the way that I have stayed kind of looking at the big picture is just kind of association and understanding the different levels of medicine. It's having an appreciation for what medicine does, where my kind of modus operandi, just like way that I want to operate, is mostly primary prevention. So these are the mentors within medicine that I found that have companies kind of based around primary prevention that also have a similar mindset, because what it does is if you have a lot of primary prevention, you reduce the amount of work you also need to do when it comes to secondary, tertiary, and quaternary prevention. And those things are a lot more time intensive. And there's a physician shortage also going on. So it kind of just decreases the workload altogether. So it's kind of nipping the problem in the bud instead of kind of working through whatever the traditional way medicine has. And that also is kind of the entrepreneur's mindset, where you see a problem and you attack it. And the way I'm attacking it is by reducing the entire workflow that would have to happen if something actually happens to someone. That was very long-winded, probably a lot of rambling, but that's a little stream of mine.
I really liked how you unpacked the different levels: primary, secondary, tertiary, and what was the last one?
Quaternary, yeah.
Quaternary. Huh. New word. That's really insightful, because obviously, I mean, if someone's like on the tertiary level, then you're gonna have to nuke whatever is in their body. It's like there's no question of trying to have these more subtle sort of preventative kind of things. So that makes a lot of sense. But there's just one thing that I'd like to respond to that you said. How little time physicians have in the hospitals, and they're just kind of like cogs in the machine. Like what machine is that exactly? Is that a money making machine? What machine is that? Because it seems to me like if we're really out to help people here, then like they need time in order to like deal with the actual primary causes of their problems. I mean, shouldn't that be happening?
In an ideal world, yes, it would be fantastic if we could have more physicians that were able to spend time. My personal mentor has a clinic where he's able to spend essentially as much time as he needs with patients. But the thing is, he owns the clinic. He does what he wants in there. Whereas what happens is, in kind of the natural progression of how medicine has gone in at least the United States, it's not a problem in a lot of other countries. Is the main culprit to blame is oftentimes insurance companies. And I guess medical schools as well, because if you think about it, I graduated medical school with $200,000 in debt. If I don't have a job, what am I going to do? Like, I literally can't do anything. So at that point, you're kind of glued to trying to get out of that debt. And that's something that you have to go through, because there's no other place that you can learn this quality of medicine and learn actually what it takes to go to medical school. And like, not medical school, but learn what it takes to actually help people with medicine at the highest degree. They kind of have a monopoly on that, which is unfortunate, but that's kind of just how politics go. That's how like the entire system is set up. I can't do anything about that. That's been going on since this country was founded. So there's so many, like, you graduate medical school with all this debt. You have to get a job. If you leave the job, you're essentially taking a massive gamble on your ability to pay off that debt. And also, large hospital systems are starting to buy up all those smaller things and imposing their rules. As you see, like these large companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, they're all buying up all the smaller competitors. And then you kind of have to go within whatever they want to do, right? Because they own you. So that's kind of how medicine is going as well, where these large insurance companies and hospital systems are buying up the smaller practices. And then their main practice is to make money. Physicians are trying to do as best they can. within the system, but it's getting increasingly difficult. And this is something that I actually, once again, talked about on an episode of Prevent Pod. I talked with the CEO of a kind of a health insurance company, and he talked about how I guess we have to rebuild the system from another side. But that's a whole nother conversation for like an entire healthcare system.
Totally. You get all my skeptic trauma and triggers just getting that last little bit.
But
I was like, see,
what I can say is that physicians are always there for the benefit of the patient. I haven't met a single like physician who's just like, oh, this gets me more money, I'm going to do this. They're always there for the benefit of the patient. They just have to work within the constraints of the system. And that applies to any other job. Like if you are an engineer, you want to do something, you have a great idea, but the company says, no, you have to do this. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to get fired? Are you going to go start your own thing, which is a massive risk? How are you going to feed your family? And then when it comes to like even let's say the temple life, if there's a strict regimen, you have to wake up for Mangalarti, you have to do this, you have to go to all these classes, you have to book distribute, and someone doesn't want to do it, they want to do their own thing. What's going to happen? He's going to get kicked out. If he doesn't have any other place to live, what is he going to do?
Right. You know, Raghav, I want to believe you. I believe you. I think you are a good person and you attract people who are like you. And so therefore you've never met a physician that's just wanted to, make money.
Yeah.
But I promise you, I at least know one person. This person is a doctor. He was a doctor at the time. This is very early on in my Hare Krishna experience. And this person had graduated. He was a doctor. And he legit told me, like almost point blank, he was in it for the money. And I was like appalled because he was a devotee also. I'm like, aren't you supposed to be a devotee? Like I couldn't. Yeah. And he just said it like very matter of factly, like it wasn't even that big of a deal. So of course that speaks to his personality or his issues or whatever it is. So I want to believe, and I do believe you. I can say right now, though, if you are going to medicine for the money right now, you have made a grave mistake. This is not where you make money. Oh, really?
Not anymore. Because there's so much debt, the pay isn't even that great. If you want to make money, go into tech, find a startup, bank on that IPO.
Okay, noted.
Yeah, the whole debt thing. I mean, I especially in the US, your tertiary education is so exorbitantly expensive.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious, that's absurd. $200K worth of debt. How long is that going to take you to pay off, bro?
I mean, I personally plan to pay off within like next 6 or 7 years. But some people, it could take a lot longer. I'm willing to live militantly with as little as possible until I pay that off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you.
It just seems like it just gets my sort of like revolutionary molecules like pulsating inside me, hearing you being so oppressed by this system basically, and having no way of really managing that. And I hear the whole like risk benefit kind of argument, like sure, that makes sense, but anyway, it's just so multi-layered because the thing is just the whole way that the Western lifestyle works, it's just there's so much artificiality, and then it's like you need artificial sort of methods to deal with the issues that have been caused by artificiality to begin with, and then it's like it's just so it's very complicated. But anyway, as Jai says, Raghav, I also believe that your heart is in the right place.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jai, any last points?
I all my questions I had lined up, they've been answered. I'm already into weightlifting. Like I've actually acquired a taste for it. Didn't realize it until I had to cancel my gym membership recently, and I was really despondent about that. So I'm about to just invest in like my own little gym.
Yeah, you could do that yourself too. I can't wait to have a home gym.
Yeah.
Whenever you want, just go outside. There you go.
Exactly. So I'm about to invest some energy into that. So for me, this is just more confirmation of something that I like to do. But I've also come to discover that it's something that helps a lot of people, particularly mentally. I had a friend who had some very severe depression at one point,
and he started going to the gym, and he's just had like a complete turnaround. Not a complete like 100%, but like
it helps a lot.
Like a lot. And he was just like a more jolly and joyful person. So yeah, my agenda in inviting you on this episode was to give encouragement to that, because I do get messages from guys, I wouldn't say regularly, but often enough for me to be like, people are really struggling with depression. And what might they do to, well, there's a spiritual attack to it, but there are also very practical ways you might be able to take some of the edge off, and this seemed like one of them, and you spoke to that very nicely. You're super articulate. Articulate isn't the word I'm looking for. I'm going to say efficient.
I'm not articulate.
I'm going to say efficient. You're very efficient with your words. Like you're like, boop, boop, got it. You know, and it was nice. It was good. You did well.
It's practice with my own podcast. I wouldn't even say I'm that good at it. When I listen to my own recordings, I'm like, wow, that is not good. It's so much rambling.
Dude, I don't know how you manage to just even hear your own voice. I can hardly play back my own voice without. I'm just like ready to.
No pain, no gain.
The thing is, I have to hear myself quite recently, because I'm an online counselor. So it's like I need to assess myself sometimes, and I have to put up with that sort of like austerity quite regularly, actually.
So what's the name of your podcast? How can people find you and get in touch with you?
Sure. The my Instagram, I think, is the way that I'm most active, and that's at. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my name. I'm trying to buy it from whoever it is, but I think they're a bot. But it's _Raghav Sharma, RAGAV SHARMA.
Yeah. So apologies about spelling your name wrong.
That's all right. Every brown person does it. I don't know why there's no H in it, but it's okay. And so that's my Instagram. And then from there, you can find everything else. The podcast is the Preventive Medicine Podcast. All the links are on my own Instagram page.
Okay. So at _Ragav Sharma.
Yep.
Julio.
Got it. Okay, Raghav. Thanks, bro.
Oh, there's one more _ after the Sharma, but it should pop up after that.
All right, cool. My bad.
Nice. All right, gentlemen. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Any other burning questions?
That's it.
All right, I'm ready. I'm ready to go now.
I mean, I got burning questions, but then it would be a whole nother episode. I got a whole bunch of burning questions, but we'll leave it for when we're ready for more controversial topics.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. Hare Krishna, everybody.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Raghav.